It started with a simple delivery, a small brown box, left on my porch at noon. By sunset, it was gone. At first, I thought maybe it was misplaced. Maybe the courier made a mistake. Then another package vanished. And another. I checked my cameras, nothing. Clean sweep. Whoever it was knew exactly when to strike. Until one morning, I saw it. A flash of red on the corner of my screen. A woman in a bright red dress, sunglasses glinting, walking like she owned the street. She looked around once, then lifted my box, smiled, and walked away. That's when I realized it wasn't a thief. It was her, our HOA president, the woman who lectured us about community rules, the one who fined me for having my trash bin out too long, the one who said, "We protect our neighborhood." She was stealing from it, and that's when I decided I'd make sure she never forgot what she'd done. For 2 nights, I didn't sleep. Every sound, every shadow outside my porch light, it all kept my eyes wide open. Because now I wasn't waiting for a package, I was waiting for her, the woman in the red dress, the same woman who smiled at everyone on Sunday mornings, who waved at mailmen, who bragged about keeping the community clean. And yet, she was the stain. The next day, I called the delivery company and ordered 3 boxes. Each identical in size, taped perfectly, marked with fake shipping labels. Inside each, a small surprise, not dangerous. Just unforgettable. I took out a jar of industrial grade red dye, the kind used in bank security bags, the kind that doesn't wash off for days, mixed it with powdered glitter, bright gold flecks that shimmered in sunlight. I sealed it inside a spring-loaded pouch, rigged to burst the moment the box opened. Then I placed it right where she'd stolen the others, front porch, noon delivery, and waited. The next day, she couldn't resist. Through my camera feed, I saw her again, heels clicking on the pavement, the same crimson dress hugging her pride-like armor. She looked left, right, and smirked. She crouched, lifted the box, checked the label, John Davis, and whispered something I could almost read from her lips, another one. She walked fast, straight to her house across the street. I followed her every step through my zoom lens. She didn't even wait. She set the box on her pristine white kitchen counter, tore the tape, and boom. The dye exploded in a thick red mist, splattering across her face, her dress, her perfect hair. She stumbled back, gasping, eyes wide, mouth open. The gold glitter clung to her skin, her hands, her face. It looked like a crime scene met a disco ball. And I was recording every second. She ran to the sink, turned on the water, tried to scrub it off. But the red deepened, spreading across her arms like fire. Her reflection in the mirror, a woman painted in her own humiliation. That's when her son walked in. "Mom, what happened?" She froze, clutching the sink, trembling. "Nothing," she screamed. "It was just paint. Someone vandalized me." But the cameras outside told a different story. Because half the neighborhood was already staring, her red, stained hands visible through the open blinds, her screams echoing down the block. And every neighbor who'd ever lost a package suddenly realized it was her. She slammed the curtains shut, hiding from her own neighborhood. And me, I sat back, sipping coffee, watching it unfold like poetic justice. But I wasn't done. Because the moment she tried to clean her face and cover it all up, I posted the footage, caught on camera, HOA president stealing from residents. Within an hour it went viral. Within a day, she was trending. And within 48 hours, she wasn't just red-faced, she was ruined. The next morning, the sun rose bright and golden over the quiet suburban cul-de-sac, the kind of neighborhood where lawns looked too perfect to be real. But under all that calm, something was about to explode. John Davis sat inside his garage, watching through a small camera feed on his laptop. His traps were set. Every package that arrived now had a surprise invisible dye powder, mixed perfectly, that activated only when touched by warm skin. The moment it made contact, it would leave deep crimson stains impossible to wash off for days. And sure enough, at 10:42 a.m., she appeared. Sofia Wilson, the HOA president, strutted down the street like she owned it. Her signature red dress shimmered under the morning light, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She looked left, right, then smirked when she saw a fresh Amazon box on John's porch. Community safety check. She whispered to herself with a smile, stepping onto his property. But the moment her fingers touched the box, puff, A faint red mist exploded around her hands. She gasped, stumbling back, shaking her fingers, eyes wide. Within seconds, her perfect manicured hands turned bright red, like she'd dipped them in paint. She ran to her car mirror horrified, realizing it wasn't coming off. The more she rubbed, the darker it got. The red powder had soaked deep into her skin, staining not just her hands, but her reputation. And then came the whispers. Neighbors peeked from their windows, phones came out, videos started rolling. What happened to her? Is that blood? Someone gasped. Within minutes, Sofia, the woman who used to patrol everyone's porch, became the headline of her own scandal. She tried to storm back to her house, but it was too late. John opened his door calm, unbothered. "You might want to stop checking other people's mail, Sofia," he said quietly, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Her eyes froze. She knew, everyone knew, and that's when the real twist hit. The red dye wasn't just on her hands. The moment she grabbed the box, a fine mist had coated her dress, her prized, flawless red dress, and under the sunlight, the stain began to glow brighter and brighter. A slow, spreading burn of crimson light, marking her guilt for the entire street to see. She screamed, slammed the car door, and drove off, streaks of red powder trailing behind like a scarlet confession in the wind. John watched, a faint smile crossing his face. "That's one delivery you won't forget," he muttered, but what he didn't know was that Sofia wasn't done, because 2 nights later, cameras rolling, street silent, a shadow crept up his porch again. This time, she wasn't there to steal, she was there to destroy. What happens next will shock you. If you want to see how this revenge turned into a full-blown neighborhood war, the full video is linked in the description. And don't forget to subscribe because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Night fell over the quiet neighborhood, but John's house glowed faintly under the yellow porch light, the same porch where everything had begun. The red stains on Sofia's hands were still visible, even days later. She hadn't been seen at the HOA meetings, and whispers spread like wildfire. Neighbors gossiped behind curtains, phones buzzed with messages, and the once powerful HOA president had gone completely silent. But silence, as John knew too well, was never peace. It was the calm before something darker. At exactly 2:17 a.m., his motion sensors blinked red. A shadow moved across his driveway, slow, deliberate, like a predator testing the air. The camera feed flickered, static dancing on the screen, but he caught a glimpse. A figure in that same red dress, hair disheveled, eyes wild, carrying a large black garbage bag. Sofia. She moved like she was on a mission, crouched low, scanning the yard. She wasn't stealing this time. She was returning. One by one, she pulled out the ruined packages drenched in rain, ripped open, filled with dirt, and dumped them all over his front lawn. "Let's see how you like your mess," she hissed under her breath. But what she didn't know was that John had upgraded everything. Hidden under the porch steps were new sensors, pressure triggered, connected to a small speaker system. And as soon as she stepped closer, a low mechanical click echoed through the night. Sofia froze, her eyes darted around, breath sharp. Then a voice, deep, steady, almost mechanical, came from the shadows. "Step away from the property, Sofia." Her blood ran cold. She turned, but there was no one there. Just the flicker of the porch light and the camera lens glinting like an unblinking eye. "Step away, or you'll regret it." Panic took over. She stumbled back, tripping over her own discarded boxes, heart hammering. "You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president," she yelled into the darkness. The voice replied, colder this time, "Not anymore." A faint hiss followed. A second later, PFFFFT, the sprinklers burst on, shooting jets of sticky fluorescent water across the yard. It was mixed with a new, harmless but brightly glowing liquid dye, one that shimmered under the moonlight like molten fire. Within seconds, Sofia was drenched head to toe, glowing like a neon ghost in the dark. Her red dress turned into a glowing spectacle orange, pink, and bright scarlet streaks lighting up the lawn. The whole street lit up with laughter as blinds opened, phones came out, and cameras captured every second of her meltdown. "Turn it off, turn ID off," she screamed, spinning wildly, slipping in the mud. But John didn't move from inside. He just watched silently from the monitor, every drop of revenge perfectly timed. By the time Sofia stumbled back to her car, dripping, glowing, and furious, the entire street had witnessed her downfall. And as her taillights vanished down the dark street, John leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Round one, complete," he muttered, closing his laptop with a click. But little did he know Sofia wasn't the kind of woman to surrender. She wasn't going to let humiliation end her reign, because while John slept peacefully, believing the war was over, she was already planning her next move. A move that would make everything before look like child's play. 3 days later, the quiet neighborhood looked deceptively peaceful. Birds chirped, sprinklers hissed softly, but beneath that calm, tension brewed like a storm behind every window. Everyone had seen the viral footage Sofia, the once feared HOA president, glowing like a radioactive sunset as she screamed in front of John's house. She had become the neighborhood's biggest joke, memes, TikToks, even a parody song called The Neon Karen. But while others laughed, Sofia seethed. She hadn't slept properly since that night. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, her HOA board had gone silent, and her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Sitting in her car one afternoon, she stared at John's house from a distance, her reflection in the windshield almost unrecognizable. The red dress was gone. She wore black now, hoodie up, gloves on, eyes cold. "This isn't over," she whispered, not by a long shot. That night, the moon hid behind clouds. The air felt heavy, strange, electric. John was inside his home office, editing security footage, sipping coffee when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then complete darkness. He frowned, checked the breaker. Everything seemed fine. He tried to reboot his system, but every camera feed showed static. Then his phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You like watching others, John. Let's see how you look on camera." Before he could react, the sound of something shattering echoed outside. He rushed to the window. Nothing. Silence. Then another crash. He ran to the porch. The mailbox was smashed open. The yard scattered with old, soggy packages he'd thrown away weeks ago. And right in the center of the lawn, a single box. Perfectly wrapped. Red ribbon. No address. His instinct screamed not to touch it. But curiosity pulled him forward. He bent down slowly, lifted the lid, and froze. Inside was a tablet. On the screen, looping over and over, was footage of him, sleeping, working, walking around the house, different angles, different days. Someone had been watching him. His heart dropped. He spun around. Nothing, but the air felt different now, thick, watching. A faint whisper drifted through the darkness. "Not so fun when it's your turn, is it?" The voice was unmistakable. "Sofia." He bolted back inside, locked the door, and pulled up his system offline. Every feed dead, every backup camera jammed. He muttered, "No way, she couldn't have." But she had. The next morning, he checked his front door. A small red handprint was smeared across it. Dry paint the same shade as her old dress. The neighborhood woke up to find Sofia's flyers taped everywhere. "Beware of John Davis, the neighborhood stalker. He spies on us all." Her revenge wasn't just physical anymore, it was psychological. By noon, neighbors avoided eye contact. By sunset, his phone buzzed with HOA complaints. And by nightfall, his security alarm tripped again, but this time the sound came from inside. John froze, heart pounding. The lights flickered back on, and there, written across his living room mirror in red paint, were 4 chilling words: "Eyes on you, John." He backed away slowly, hand trembling. Sofia was no longer playing games. She had declared war. By the next morning, John Davis had stopped shaking. The fear was still there, yes, but it had hardened into something sharper. Focus. He wasn't just the man who got pranked by an HOA Karen anymore. He was the man who had built his own security company, coded his own software, and designed the die trap that made Sofia the neighborhood's neon legend. And now, he was done playing defense. He spent the entire morning in silence, wiring, rebuilding, and rebooting every inch of his home system. New lenses, hidden cameras, backup servers buried in his basement. He even connected his motion sensors to his phone manually. Every beep, every flicker, every shadow he'd know. Outside, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Sofia had gone full-on paranoid queen, patrolling in sunglasses and gloves, muttering about conspiracies, claiming John was monitoring everyone's private lives. By sunset, She called for an emergency HOA meeting right there on the cul-de-sac. And everyone came, phones out, ready to film. She stood on a folding chair, holding a megaphone, voice trembling with fury. He's spying on us. He's dangerous. I have proof. John stepped out from his porch, calm, collected, a faint smirk tugging at his face. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just watched. Then, when Sofia held up a folder of evidence, John clicked a button on his phone. The big screen across the neighborhood park usually used for HOA announcements flickered to life. And there she was, Sofia, caught on multiple cameras, stealing packages, breaking into mailboxes and spray painting doors, all in that infamous red dress. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Wait." She did all that. Another neighbor shouted, "You framed him." Sofia froze. Her face drained of color. Her hands shook as her megaphone dropped to the ground with a dull thud. John stepped forward, voice cold but calm. "You wanted proof, Sofia. There it is. Yours." For a long moment, the whole street went silent, the kind of silence that hums before something breaks. Then Sofia screamed, "It's fake. It's edited. He's manipulating." But John wasn't done. He pressed another button and the live police feed popped onto the screen. 2 officers were already walking up the street toward them. "Someone's been filing false reports," one of them said, "and we've got enough evidence now to make it official." Sofia stumbled backward, shaking her head, voice cracking. No, you don't understand. He's the problem, But her words died as the handcuffs clicked. The crowd didn't cheer, they didn't clap, they just watched. Because for the first time in years, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA wasn't shouting orders, she was being led away, red paint still faintly staining her fingers. John exhaled slowly, watching her disappear into the flashing lights. Then he turned to the neighbors, some ashamed, some relieved. He didn't say a word, just walked back into his house and shut the door. But deep down, he knew something. It wasn't over, not yet. Because Sofia wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat. And somewhere out there, in the back of a police car or maybe later in a courtroom, she was already planning her next move. John looked at his cameras, then at the reflection in his window, calm but alert. Round 2. He whispered, "Let's see if you're ready." 3 weeks passed. The neighborhood had gone quiet, too quiet. John Davis thought it was over, that Sofia's arrest had finally ended the madness. The HOA meeting stopped. The threatening letters vanished. For once, he could walk to his mailbox without the sting of 1,000 judgmental eyes. But peace in Maplewood Lane was an illusion, because Sofia Wilson was not done, not even close. While sitting behind county jail bars, she discovered something that made her smile again. Her lawyer was her cousin, and he owed her a favor. By the 4th week, she was out, not acquitted, not innocent, but bailed. The night she returned, the sky was a deep crimson fitting, almost symbolic, against her red dress. She stood in front of her once perfect white fence, staring at John's house, a faint smirk crawling across her face, and she had a new plan. This time she wouldn't steal. She wouldn't trespass. She would manipulate. The next morning, she went door to door, not shouting, not blaming, smiling, offering apologies, fake tears, carefully chosen words. "John set me up." She whispered to each neighbor. "He's dangerous. You saw the footage, but think about it. Who else could have edited that? He's an IT guy, a hacker. He controls our security feeds. Doubt. That's all she needed to plant. By sunset, whispers had spread like wildfire. Maybe Sofia wasn't the villain after all. Maybe John was too smart for his own good. When John came out to collect a package that evening, no one waved, no one smiled. He felt it, the shift, the weight. Then he noticed something chilling, a package sitting on his porch, no return address, no courier label, just his name in perfect handwriting. He picked it up slowly, eyes narrowing. Inside was a single note folded neatly. In red ink it read, "You can't trap what you can't see. Round 2 begins tonight." And beneath the note, a flash drive. John's heartbeat quickened. He went straight to his workstation, locked the doors, plugged it in, and opened the only file on it, a video feed. It was his own living room, recorded from a hidden angle he didn't recognize. He froze. Someone had been inside his house. The footage showed him sleeping, peacefully, the time stamp, 2 nights ago. John's breath caught. Impossible. He whispered. He rewound. The moment before the clip started the faint reflection of a figure in the window. Red, flowing, moving slow, his hands clenched into fists. She had been there, and the worst part, the security footage didn't catch her. Sofia had found a way around his cameras. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, John stood motionless, staring at the screen, and the faint whisper of Sofia's laughter played from the file's audio feed. Not loud, not mocking, just soft, controlled, like she was standing right behind him. John turned fast, but there was no one there. Only the hum of his computer and the flashing red light of his recording system. He looked straight into the lens and said softly, "You want war, Sofia, you've got it." The house lights flickered once, then went dark, and outside in the rain a red figure moved past the camera unseen except for the faint trail of muddy footprints leading to his porch. The battle that started with stolen packages had become something much darker. It wasn't about mail anymore. It was about control, and this time, both of them were willing to burn everything to the ground to win. Rain poured like vengeance that night, heavy, relentless, the kind of storm that made streetlights flicker and shadows look alive. John stood by the window, watching every drop bounce off the porch. His phone buzzed an unknown number. He didn't pick up. Then another buzz, a message, "You should check your porch again." His pulse quickened. He grabbed the flashlight, opened the door, and stepped out into the storm. Nothing. The porch was empty except, for one thing, a red ribbon tied neatly to the railing. It fluttered in the wind, dripping with rainwater. John looked around, scanning every corner, every parked car, every movement in the dark. And then he saw her. Across the street, Sofia, her red dress soaked through, clinging to her frame. She was barefoot, mascara running, hair plastered to her face but her smile. Her smile was pure madness. "You think you can scare me?" John shouted over the thunder. "You already are scared," she replied, her voice eerily calm. Then she dropped something, a package, wrapped in brown paper just like the others. John took one step forward. She turned and ran. He sprinted across the street, rain splashing, heart pounding. The package was lighter than expected. He tore it open and froze. Inside was one of his cameras, destroyed, and taped to it another note, "Catch me if you can, landlord." Lightning flashed. For a split second, he saw her running through the alley, red dress glowing against the storm's gray. He chased her, through puddles, past fences, slipping on wet concrete. She was fast, but he was furious. At the edge of the neighborhood, she darted into the old maintenance shed, the one behind the HOA office. John followed, breath ragged, flashlight cutting through the dark. The door creaked open and he stepped inside, empty, just shelves, dust, rain dripping through the roof, and then click. The door slammed shut behind him. A second later, his phone buzzed again, a video link. He clicked it, chest heaving. It showed a live feed of his own house, his living room, on fire. No. He whispered, "No, no, no." He rammed the door. It didn't budge. The shed's single window was locked from outside. Smoke filled his thoughts before it filled his lungs. He was trapped not in flames, but in Sofia's game. Then her voice came through the phone speaker, calm and cruel. "Now you know what it feels like to lose everything you built, to be watched, to be powerless." He looked up. There was a small vent in the ceiling. He climbed onto a shelf, kicked it open, and pulled himself through the narrow metal shaft. Rain lashed his face as he crawled out onto the shed roof. From there, he saw it. His house wasn't burning. It was a fake projection. A giant LED screen flashing behind the window, simulating firelight. She had tricked him again, and she was standing on his porch, holding a gasoline can, staring right at him through the rain. John roared, jumped down, and charged through the storm. She turned and bolted down the street, red dress glowing like a flame in the dark. When he caught her at the intersection, they both slipped, falling hard onto the wet road. The can rolled away, spilling harmless water. She laughed wild, breathless, almost triumphant. "You'll never win, John," she hissed, "because I don't care if I lose." He grabbed her arm, drenched, shaking. "This ends tonight, Sofia." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating their faces' rage and exhaustion, predator and prey, both drenched in the same madness. But then, the distant sound of sirens. Neighbors had called the cops. Sofia's eyes widened. You called them? He shook his head. Didn't have to. She looked around, panic flooding in for the first time. The cops pulled up fast, lights flashing red and blue through the rain. When they got out, one of them shouted, "Hands where we can see them." John raised his hands slowly. Sofia froze, too proud to surrender, too tired to run. Then, with one final smirk, she whispered, "See you soon, landlord." She lifted her hands, bright red dye dripping from her palms. John's trap, from the package she'd tried to steal earlier that morning. The officers looked at her, stunned, and in that single moment, the rain washed away her lies, revealing her crime in plain, dyed red proof. John just stood there, chest heaving, rain washing the dirt from his face. The war was over, or at least, that's what he thought, because as the cops dragged her away, she turned one last time and said softly, "This neighborhood doesn't belong to you, John. It never will." And behind her, in the distance, the HOA office lights flickered back on. Someone else was inside, watching. The story wasn't over. It had only evolved. The next morning, the storm was gone, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the rain ever did. John stood in front of what was once his peaceful home, now surrounded by police tape and flashing lights. The street smelled of wet concrete, electricity, and broken trust. Officers moved around quietly, collecting statements, dusting for fingerprints. Sofia Wilson, the red-dressed queen of the HOA, was gone, taken away in handcuffs. But the way she smiled as she was led into the police car, that unnerved John. It wasn't a look of defeat, it was a promise. Detective Harris approached, notebook in hand. "You've had quite a night, Mr. Davis." John rubbed his temples. "She burned my cameras, vandalized my property, and nearly got me killed. I'd call that more than a night." Harris sighed, closing the notebook. "We found something you need to see." He motioned toward an unmarked car. Inside sat a laptop water, damaged but functional. Harris hit play on a recovered video file. Sofia's voice came through the speakers, distorted but clear. "Operation Phoenix begins tonight. The board must never be connected. If anything happens, the footage gets deleted and the blame goes to me. Understood?" Then came another voice. A man's deep, calm, authoritative. "Understood, and remember, Sofia, you volunteered." John froze. Who was that? Harris looked at him grimly. "That's what we're trying to find out. But based on this, it looks like your friendly neighborhood HOA had more layers than we thought." John leaned against the car, staring into the street. The quiet houses looked normal again, trimmed hedges, white fences, the illusion of peace. But he knew better now. Sofia wasn't working alone. As he was thinking, an SUV pulled up. Out stepped a tall man in a tailored navy suit, calm and polite, holding an umbrella. "Mr. Davis," he said with a corporate smile, "I'm Daniel Mercer, Vice President of the Regional Homeowners Association Council. I've been asked to oversee things while we reorganize your local chapter." John crossed his arms. "Reorganize? After what happened, you should be dismantling it." Daniel's smile didn't falter. Now, let's not overreact. Sofia's behavior was unfortunate, but isolated. Our goal is to restore harmony. Harris cut in. "Mr. Mercer, your name just came up in a recorded conversation from last night." Daniel turned slightly, pretending to be surprised. "Really? Then I suppose we'll need to discuss that formally." He gave a faint smirk. "But not here." And just like that, he walked off, slipping into his SUV, leaving behind a swirl of questions and tension thicker than the morning fog. John's gut tightened. He knew a liar when he saw one. Sofia might have been the face of corruption, but Mercer was the architect. That night, John couldn't sleep. The storm had moved on, but the thunder still echoed in his head. He sat at his desk, reviewing footage from his surviving cameras. Frame by frame, hour by hour, and then at 2:17 a.m. he found it. A shadow near the HOA office, not Sofia, not a neighbor. A tall man in a navy suit, Mercer, carrying a briefcase, entering the office after police had already cleared the scene. "What are you hiding?" John muttered. He grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and phone, and stepped out into the damp night. The HOA office stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, once a symbol of order, now a dark monument of deceit. Its windows glowed faintly from inside. John crept closer. Through the blinds, he saw Mercer opening a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. Inside were rows of labeled USB drives, files, and what looked like surveillance footage. John's pulse quickened. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Suddenly, Mercer's head snapped toward the window, locking eyes with him. For a second, neither moved. Then Mercer calmly reached over, pressed a button on the wall, and every light in the office went dark. "Damn it," John whispered. He darted toward the door, tried the handle locked. Then from behind him, a voice, "Out late again, Mr. Davis." He turned. Two private security guards stood near the sidewalk, dressed in black, badges reading Property Protection Unit. "This area's off limits," one said. John took a step back. "You work for Mercer. Sir, please leave the premises." But before he could respond, Mercer reappeared in the doorway, now perfectly composed, the faintest smirk on his lips. "Mr. Davis," he said calmly, "you really should get some rest. You've had a rough week." "What's in those files?" John demanded. What did Sofia mean by Operation Phoenix? Mercer chuckled softly. "Some messes are better left buried. You should focus on rebuilding. Leave the cleanup to us." He gestured to the guards, "Escort him home." As the men approached, John clenched his fists. His fight wasn't over, not even close. Mercer thought he could bury the truth under corporate polish and polite smiles. But John Davis had already seen the monster behind the curtain, and he wasn't backing down. When the guards turned to lead him away, John noticed something in Mercer's hand, a single envelope. On it, in neat handwriting, "For the next one who tries." And beneath it, a red fingerprint. The same dye from Sofia's trap. His message was clear. Mercer wasn't just cleaning up Sofia's mess. He was continuing it. John walked away slowly, eyes burning through the night. He whispered under his breath, "You built this system to control people, but I'm going to burn it down." And as he disappeared into the darkness, Mercer watched from the window, expression unreadable, a puppet master, waiting for his next move to unfold. The HOA war was far from over. It had just changed hands. The next morning, the entire street was buzzing. People whispered in driveways, phones in their hands, eyes darting toward Karen's house. Because now, the video was everywhere. John's footage, showing the HOA president sneaking onto his porch, stealing boxes and getting hit by a splash of red dye, had gone viral overnight. News channels replayed it. The HOA group chat exploded. Even local cops showed up, not for John this time, but for her. Karen, still stained red, stood in disbelief on her lawn as officers questioned her. She kept shouting it was a setup, he trapped me, but no one believed her. Because evidence doesn't lie in her hands, her hair, her once pristine red dress now glowed crimson in the morning sun, a mark she couldn't wash away. As neighbors filmed her meltdown, John stepped outside calmly, coffee in hand. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The whole world had already seen the truth. And just as she screamed one last time about her authority, the officer looked at her and said the words that silenced the entire street. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for theft and property invasion." That's when Karen froze. The same woman who lectured everyone about community rules now stood handcuffed on her own porch, covered in red. John turned away with a small smile, because justice doesn't always knock, it sometimes delivers itself in bright red. He took one last sip of coffee, walked inside, and locked his gate. For good this time. Days passed, but the echo of that morning never really faded. The image of Karen, once the queen of the cul-de-sac, standing humiliated in her own yard, lingered like a shadow on every doorstep. John didn't celebrate. He didn't post follow-ups or brag online. Instead, he kept quiet, spending his mornings sitting on the porch where it all began, the same porch where those packages once disappeared, one by one, until he decided he'd had enough. He watched as neighbors walked by, each of them stopping for a moment, giving him that look, a quiet nod of respect. The same people who once ignored his complaints now treated him differently. He had become, in a way, the symbol of standing up to the silent bullies that hide behind rules and power. But deep down, John wasn't proud. He was reflective. Because revenge, even when it feels justified, comes with its own kind of weight. That night, as the streetlights flickered, he sat alone on the steps, watching the empty chair across from his yard, the one Karen used to sit in, pretending to guard the peace of the community. Now her house was dark, quiet, and empty. The HOA board had suspended her, and word was she was moving out for good. The irony wasn't lost on him. She used to chase everyone for not belonging. And now she was the one leaving, marked by her own choices. A breeze rolled through the quiet night. The neighborhood felt calm for the first time in years. No more arguments over paint shades, no more threats of HOA fines, just crickets and the distant hum of peace returning home. He looked down at his hands steady, calm, and realized something. It wasn't the dye trap or the viral fame that gave him closure. It was this moment, the quiet after the storm, the silence that replaced chaos. And as he stood up, he whispered under his breath, "Peace." Finally. Then he walked back inside, turned off the porch light, and for the first time in a long time slept without worry. The sun rose slow and golden the next morning, warm light spilling across the quiet suburban street that had witnessed more drama than most movie scripts could hold. The lawns were still, the air smelled of dew and cut grass, and for once there was no yelling, no HOA threats, no stolen packages. John Davis stood by his gate, the same one that had started it all, sipping his coffee in silence. It wasn't victory that filled him, it was clarity. For weeks, he'd been called everything online: the mastermind neighbor, the dye trap guy, the man who exposed the HOA queen. But behind all that noise, something deeper had happened. He'd learned that when people like Karen abuse power long enough, they start believing they're untouchable until one small act of truth turns their empire to dust. He'd given her countless chances. He'd stayed polite, filed complaints, even tried reasoning. But she didn't stop because people like her never do. They think silence means weakness. They mistake patience for surrender. Until someone shows them what real restraint looks like, not by shouting louder, but by letting the truth paint itself. In red, Karen's downfall wasn't the dye on her hands or the laughter of neighbors watching her panic. It was the mirror that moment forced her to face. The one she'd been avoiding for years. Because when power corrupts, exposure purifies. A soft breeze rustled the flag near his porch. Across the street, a moving truck sat parked outside Karen's old house. Workers loaded boxes while she stood there, arms crossed, her once fiery glare now dulled, hidden behind sunglasses that couldn't cover her shame. John didn't gloat. He just watched quietly, nodded once, and turned back to his gate. As she climbed into her car, she looked over just once and their eyes met. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked small, tired, human, and maybe, in that split second, she finally understood. This wasn't about packages. It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, the ones you cross when you think others won't stand up, and the ones you rebuild when you finally do. John took a deep breath. The street was peaceful again, kids playing, laughter echoing down the road where once there'd been shouting and suspicion. He smiled to himself, walked to his porch, and looked straight into the camera he'd installed, the one that started the entire chain of events. He pressed the button, stopped the recording, and whispered, almost to himself, "Some lessons don't need repeating." Then he turned toward the sunlight, hands in his pockets, as the camera slowly panned away, the neighborhood gleaming behind him, peaceful, almost cinematic. A faint voiceover carried through the quiet scene. When you take from others, life takes from you. When you cross lines, truth paints them back in color you can't wash away. And when you think you own everything, remember, even the ground you stand on can rise against you. This wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. Fade out. Music swells calm, reflective, powerful. Morals some stains never wash off.